Welcome to our Journey to Health. This is our fourth forum of the year, community forum. My name is Dr. Chris Canfield. I'm on the committee for the Journey to Health at Fisher-Titus, trying to help with prevention of diseases in our service area. And our behavioral health team and I decided we wanted to do something about behavioral health in September. The title of this is Challenges and Opportunities in Adolescent Mental Health. Our speakers are my delightful behavioral health team, Beth, Logan, Dr. Ken Murray, Laura Butler, and we have Detective Sergeant Jerod Farris. I'm doing this in conjunction with the Western Reserve Community Engagement Committee because they needed a project and thought this was a good one. We did send invitations out to all the schools, so hopefully they'll be able to take advantage of watching this on the website. But I'm really excited about the diversity of people we have here today. So without further ado, we're going to let our first speaker, Beth Logan, talk about the state of adolescent mental health and just kind of pass the, so to speak, to the next person.
All right. So my name's Beth Logan, and today I'm going to give like a pretend State of the Union address. It's the state of adolescent mental health. Whenever we try to talk about this, there's a really tricky bit to it because we're part of a much larger community nowadays than we could have ever imagined 50 years ago. The internet has connected kids globally, adults globally, and it's truly transformed the way mental health functions as a whole. With this massive influence on our social and emotional well-being, teens in particular tend to be susceptible to a lot of influence. A large portion of recent research reflects declining mental health for all ages in recent years, but particularly for youth. I could fill the whole day talking about those statistics, the different influencing factors, what research currently says. So if there are questions, I'd be more than happy to address those afterward. So I got a lot more material than what I actually put on here. I've got a little about me slide. It's very simple. I'm a clinical counselor here with Fisher-Titus. I've been here since last year, but I've been practicing in the field in various capacities since 2009. I'm a foster parent for Erie and Huron counties, and I'm also just a really big reader. I love sci-fi, horror, nerd, what can I say? As we talk about the state of mental health, we'll talk a bit about national statistics rather than starting with global statistics. We're just gonna do national because largely our national statistics for the US are relatively in line with other countries of similar demographics. Nationally, children in the US tend to have somewhat greater engagement for treatment. They're showing up to treatment more, they're engaged in treatment more than some other peers in different countries. But they're also at a slightly higher rate of risk for distress than other kids in similar nations. Other than that, our statistics are largely the same. I'll also be talking a little bit about statistics for Huron County, the state of Ohio, but I want to start by introducing an invaluable resource, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is something that's collected by the CDC. They issue it every 10 years. They interview kids through, now it's mostly online or paper format, where they collect data about what students are feeling, what they're thinking, how they describe their engagement with a litany of different issues, including accessing mental health services, but also experiences of sexual abuse or sex behaviors, substance use, experiencing violence, a whole bunch of different things that are very important. And at every page, you will see I have a little QR code over here. That is going to be your ticket to accessing any of these resources at any time. Every 2 years when they do this survey, after 10 years of collecting data, they've been able to aggregate from 2011 to 2021, the most recent data set, shows that there's an increase, unsurprisingly, in kids reporting persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and that statistic has nearly doubled, 42%. Since we started collecting this data at the beginning in 2011. There are previous archived data sets available on the CDC's website, and you can go back and it just continues that same trend. We did see a significant spike with the pandemic. Trends in the high school students who felt persistent sadness, hopelessness, declining mental health, and even students who made a plan for suicide worsened across all genders, across all ethnicities, and all races. That being said, it's not all negative. The same youth risk behavior survey reflects that there are positives happening. And additionally, indicators of positive mental health work have been tracked in different ways by the CDC. Again, a nice little QR code for a different article here, talking about how we can measure positive mental health. In ages 3 to 5, we talk about affectation, positivity, and curiosity. Those are all on the rise in kids. And that's due in part to the efforts of parents and teachers really trying to make sure kids know how to advocate for themselves. We're also noticing that in ages 6 to 11, 93% of kids are saying they're curious. Their parents notice they're engaged with things. They're persistent in what they want to seek out. They have some capacity for self-control. It's one of the lowest numbers in this data set at 73.8% of kids have self-control at least some of the time, according to their parents. When we looked at teenagers, ages 12 to 17, you can see that they changed a little bit of what they tracked. They talked about not just persistence and curiosity, but also the self-control, which did trend upward as compared to younger kiddos. We try to think about positive mental health things first because the rest of this is going to be a little heavy. I'm going to tell you right now, we will be discussing topics relating to suicide. If you have questions or if you have concerns about how to access support for that, I will gladly give you access to any information necessary. It is something that I've spent my entire career dealing with. That being said, it is more common than you think to deal with mental health problems. We used to say this average statistic was 1 in 5 adults would experience a mental health problem at some point in their life. Now for children, we're talking about a higher rate. 9.8% of kids ages 3 to 17 have the ability to be clinically diagnosed with ADHD, one of the most common disruptive developmental disorders reported. Meanwhile, rates of depression and anxiety have also increased from 2003, when it was at just 5.4% of kids, to now about 15% as of 2019. I included a couple other statistics regarding the prevalence of different types of mental illness. Mental illness is one of the leading causes of disability in children of all ages, and is one of the leading causes, unfortunately, of death in kids. As we consider things about suicide, it's that persistent sadness or hopelessness popping up again. 36.7% of kids are reporting that persistent feeling. 18% have seriously considered suicide. Beyond this, even beyond what's shown up here, about 2% of kids attempted suicide that required medical intervention, hospitalization. Depression and anxiety are some of the most common mental health problems that you'll see happen in the community for children and teens, but they're far from the only example. When we talk about other mental health issues that are very prevalent, you can see things like oppositional defiant disorder, alcohol and drug use, conduct disorder. All of these are continuing this negative trend of being on the rise in kiddos. As we talk a little bit more about the statistics of mental health, you can see here that at least 30% of all teens had an increased percentage rate of experiencing some type of depressive symptom or suicidal thoughts from 2019 pre-pandemic to now. And that's just astonishing. It happened across all genders, all ethnicities, all sexual orientations. I will say they did not include in this data individuals who identify as transgender or agender. It was not included in the data set. So unfortunately, we don't have additional information on that currently. They are working to add that in upcoming research. And yet, here we are dealing with anxiety, the double-edged sword of staying connected. We have so many kids who are connected to the internet, feeling this lovely global connection, being able to find new people who understand their experiences more than ever. And that's leading to greater engagement, greater understanding, greater ability to express yourselves. Research shows that staying connected is a protective factor to help us be more resilient, help us reduce the rates of severe illness. But the double-edged sword of it is that about 5.8 million children in the US have generalized social or specific anxiety disorders. That's about 9.5% of all kids ages 3 to 17. It's astonishing to think about those numbers. Almost 10% of kids have a clinically diagnosable anxiety disorder. And we'll talk a little bit about the impacts of that connectedness and the influence of social media on our kids' mental health. With the advent of social media, kids are now getting better access to the language to express their needs, express what they're experiencing. So we are seeing a simultaneous increase in social media use and an increase in diagnosed rates. We cannot yet parse apart. Is it because they're talking about it more? Or is it because they're experiencing it more? Or is it some combination thereof? Often behavioral disorders are some of the most noticeable and impactful on the family. Those things like conduct disorders or ADHD, ODD, the things that disrupt the family function. And as a whole, those contribute to higher rates of depression and anxiety and overall family dysfunction. So those tend to be the ones that get identified easiest and treated easiest. This means kids are more likely to be taking the treatment. They're more likely to have care for those things than things like depression or other mental health problems. The rise in behavioral health disorders has recently been attributed to social media usage. We can't say it's a direct cause, but there's such a strong correlation that it's heartbreaking to see kids struggling with social media right now. I have a whole article linked there dedicated to teens, screens, and quarantine. It's a pretty decent article, relatively easily readable. In terms of local statistics, while we spoke about the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that the CDC put out, that covers national statistics. But if we want to talk about Ohio and specifically Huron County's needs, we talk about OYES, the abbreviation they use for Ohio Healthy Youth Environments Survey. It also covers a broad range of different kinds of health factors, risk factors, protective factors, not just mental health, but including things like substance use, gambling, sexual health, access to medical care. And that's where I'm going to have a good number of my resources from. And that link right there with that QR code is how you can get it. In Ohio, we sometimes fall above the national average for rates of mental illness. And it is unfortunate to see that only one in 8 students nationwide may experience some type of diagnosable mental illness. It's 1 in 3 in Ohio. 1 in 3 children can meet that criteria at some point between those ages of 3 and 17 for a mental illness. The Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services released this report for Ohio Healthy, oh yes, I apologize, I can't even pull that off of my head. While kids becoming diagnosed are accessing services, we're seeing it at such a high rate that it doesn't account for just kids gaining the verbiage to express what they're saying, express what they're feeling. We're seeing a mental health crisis in Ohio, and it got worse in the pandemic. The OYES surveys have been conducted in high schools and in some middle schools for several years, and now it's estimated that with this 1 in 3 students in Ohio experiencing challenges with anxiety, depression, or other mental illnesses, It's safe to say that it's a national emergency. And Governor DeWine ultimately did end up talking about just that. In a press release that he gave in 2022, he stated he was funneling all these funds to help with mental health for kids, to help with access to services in schools, in community agencies, in private practices, and community mental health agencies. And he still said, in spite of giving over $84 million of federal funds to help with this adolescent mental health crisis, he said, quote unquote, it's still not enough. And he's absolutely correct. We're seeing this downward spiral of what I think is probably my most horrifying statistic in here, that 42.4% increase in mental illness prevalence in kids in the past few years. That means that in 2016, about 9.2% of kids experienced a mental health disorder, as reported to the OES survey. Now we're at this 2020 data set, 2023 data set, and it's soared to about 13 to 15% of kids now have a diagnosable mental health problem in the state of Ohio. It's almost double, and it's disturbing. To get kids access to support, the funds that the state have given us have to be optimized, have to be utilized, but we also need to make sure that parents and kids know how to get support. And it's one of the hardest things we can do is see that there's a problem and do something about it, admit that there's an issue. When we look at the data for Huron County in particular, the Huron County Board of Mental Health website states that as of the end of last month, there have been 585 calls to either 988, the National Suicide Hotline. They recently changed it from a long 1-800 number to just 988, or to the Firelands Hope Line, a total of 585 calls. It's a lot in just a few months. Year to date, we've also seen about 29.15 kids in Huron County accessed mental health care from a mental health care professional, whether it be their pediatrician or a psychiatrist, counselor, social worker, therapist. 29.15% of kids accessed care. And that's just the kids who are endorsing it when they talk to a healthcare professional. But there's a higher rate of kids who endorse having a mental health problem that needs further treatment that they are not getting. 33.43% of kids need treatment within the last 12 months, and it's not necessarily getting addressed. It's scary. So when we talk about all of this, it goes without saying that by now we're all aware of mental illness. We're all aware of the actual crisis that's happening. We're aware of the stigmas. We're aware of the difficulties with accessing services. Now we need to know what to do next. Some of the easiest, quickest things you can keep in mind is access needs to be increased. If there's something you can do in your work, at your home, anywhere to help someone access mental health services, do it. If that means driving somebody to an appointment, help them. If that means using a little sticker for the 988 number and putting it on somewhere visible, do it. You never know who's going to need it. We can also integrate social emotional learning into our parenting techniques. We want to work to improve resiliency with compassionate care for our kids. Parenting is taking a very dramatic turn from what it used to look like. Again, 50 years ago, the way we were raised is not the way that kids are being raised right now. The OES report recently shows an increase in adolescents reporting how they're managing stress. The positive side again. Common ways to cope with stress or mental health distress in particular include physical activity, meditation, prayer, relaxation techniques. The most common way that I clinically hear kids tell me that they're coping is through distraction. They're on their phone, they're playing games, they're talking to their friends. And we get that. Hobbies also help. Reaching out for someone who's supportive, someone who gets it. These are ways that kids know to help themselves. We also see other ways that teens handle stress include creative expression, art, music, support from others, and then eliminating people in their lives who create drama. One of the biggest things I'm hearing, kids are actually learning to set boundaries now. And that's kind of impressive because I don't remember doing that well when I was their age. So now kids are learning beyond just the awareness that mental health exists, beyond just the need to address stigma. They're doing things to effectively improve their mental health, and it's our responsibility to help them along the way. One thing that parents are now taking steps to do is consider ways to limit social media usage. And with that, we see that nature versus nurture debate. What is the cause for all of this? Is it the social media? Is it the economic disparities? Is it all this connectedness? Is there this biological indication? Is it the family dynamics? It's all of it, and it creates a perfect storm. Unfortunately, that's why we're in this mental health crisis right now. There is no one reason. Presently, there are about 122, I skipped a zero. Oh, look at that. 122,000 kiddos without insurance in the state of Ohio.
Trauma alert level 2, emergency room 4. Trauma alert level 2, emergency room 4. Trauma alert level 2, emergency room 4.
Access to treatment can be impacted not only by stigma or family dynamics, but also by these social disparities. Mental health treatment numbers may be on the rise, but so are the needs. We could talk for days about what impacts mental health. Today, we're largely going to focus on social media and how we can help our kids. What it comes down to is the need for something to change. To help us know where to start, Ken will talk a little bit about the impacts of social media on mental health for school agers. And Laura will discuss a little bit more about the steps parents in the community can take to holistically address these impacts. We've got resources, we've got options, and at the end, if you have questions, that's what we're here for. Thank you, guys.
All right. Hey, Dr. Murphy, you're up.
I'm gonna switch it to his thing.
Oh, here comes time.
All right. Thank everybody for coming. You all know 10 people that should be here. And what I'm going to ask you to do then is to go out and spread the word. You can be our ambassadors. I thank Beth for her summary of the current state of mental health for adolescents and the present. And I want to make, right off the bat, I want to say that wasn't all caused, and she said the same thing. It wasn't all caused by technology and social media, but it's one aspect we can look at and maybe do something. With a problem that big, you got to start someplace. I think technology and social media is a good place to start. I say that because I'm a child and family therapist. I've been with Fisher-Titus for 7 years. I've worked with kids for over 30 years. So I'm old enough to have seen a huge change in what's been going on in the lives of children and what's going on in their lives. One of the problems with technology is it's just changed so much so fast. I mean, it's always been difficult to be a kid. It's always been difficult to be a teenager. But the pace of technology has made it, each generation, I think, is struggling even more because things change so much and so fast. What I find is that behavior that used to be in the high schools, problems that used to be in the high schools are in the middle schools. And problems that used to be in the middle schools are in the elementary schools. And the problem is technology is changing life so fast that the kids aren't developmentally able to deal with these changes. Things are happening in their lives. They're being faced with issues and problems that they're just not able to cope with. And that's causing the stress. I'm going to talk about some of these things specifically as soon as I get, okay. Now, bullying has been around forever. I was bullied when I was in school. But back in the day, when you went home from school, you were kind of safe. unless you had a bully in your neighborhood. But at least when you went in your house, you were safe. That's not true anymore. Kids are being bullied 24/7. They're being bullied with words online, but they're also being bullied with pictures. People are making memes about them. People are taking video, sharing them online to try to humiliate and embarrass kids. And you can't get away from it, you know? I have my clients telling me that, yes, there's an official school webpage, but there's the webpage that the kids know about. And that's where you spread gossip and rumors and say nasty things about people, and nothing gets done about it. And it's easy to say, well, just don't go there. But tell that to a kid who's dealing with it. You know, they're going to go there. They're going to read it, and it's going to affect them. Lack of privacy. Put the little thing on there. If it's on the internet, it isn't private. Kids don't understand that. Again, words, pictures, and videos. They put that out there. They don't think about what the effect is going to be on themselves or other people. Little kids give out personal information. They'll give out their address, their phone numbers, what school district they're in, and they give it to people on the internet. And they don't realize that sometimes those people are not who they're pretending to be. You know, it might not be some 10-year-old boy in some other state. It might be some creepy old dude in his basement. And they're just not mature enough to comprehend that stuff. And you can tell them a million times, but sometimes it just doesn't sink in. I see people nodding, so you've heard these stories. It's out there and it's happening. And the purpose is just parents need to know about this stuff. I used to say that, years ago, that if your child had a computer in their bedroom, you had an open window into your child's bedroom. The problem is now they've got an open window in their pocket. And you don't know what creepy stuff is crawling inside. And they don't know either. And they don't appreciate the danger. For the older kids, they're not thinking about when you put something on the internet, it's always going to be there. And they might be applying for colleges. They might be applying for jobs. Well, companies and colleges, they do searches on people now. And the stuff that you think is funny when you're a teenager might not be so funny when you're out there looking for a job. And that potential employer might not think it's very funny. Unrealistic expectations. That's the same with girl. Facetune, all the other filters they have. You can make anybody look like anything. And what's the problem with that? Influencers. I hate that word, but influencers. And they do influence kids. They have thousands of followers on Instagram. And what they do is they, make themselves look like that. And then they make their lives look wonderful. That's attract followers. Oh, I want to be like that person. Well, guess what? That person isn't like that person. That person isn't living like they say they're living. I saw one video. Some people expose this. It's funny. They'll take a picture off of Instagram of the influencer, and they'll find a real photograph of them. Sometimes you could pass them on the street. You never know if it's the same person. They have a place in California where you can rent a studio, and it's a mock private jet. It's got the wall, 2 chairs, and a window, and they'll sit there with their glass of wine and pretend that they're on their own private jet. They're not. But the problem is kids watching this believe it. And then they start getting depressed. I don't look like that. My life isn't like that. There must be something wrong with me. But when you're comparing yourself to a fantasy that doesn't even really exist, of course you're going to be disappointed. What these influencers are saying is, look at me, look how wonderful my life is. But it's not real. And we've all done this to a certain extent. Nobody posts the ugly pictures on Facebook. No, you post the pictures of the happy family vacation, everything. The family fight never gets in there. So, research has shown that could depress people because you're looking at all these wonderful things. All the pictures of wonderful things people are doing, and think, my life sucks compared to that. Well, you don't know how real that really is, or you're just seeing the positive side. So it causes disappointment in real life related to depression. False connections. It says, let's be clear, we are only friends on Facebook, not in real life. Got it? It says having a lot of Facebook friends does not mean you're popular in real life. It only means you spend way too much time on Facebook. Facebook has ruined the term friend. It really has. But these connections are real to kids, particularly if that's all they've got. I remember the first teenage boy I had in my office, and he was talking about breaking up with his girlfriend, and he was distraught, and it was terrible. And I said, oh my gosh, you should go to your school. And he said, no. And I said, where does she live? He said, Arizona. He had never met her face to face, but they had been together dating for 8 months. And he was distraught that she had broken up with him. I look back at it now and I think, I don't even know that she was a 15-year-old girl. Who knows who she was? But the emotions were real for him. You know, for him, this was a real relationship and a real breakup. It gets to the point where it's all about likes and clicks and going viral. That's the connection that I remember a boy who got a dog from a shelter, which is great. Boy and their dog, great. But later that day, I kind of noticed he wasn't as happy as I would think he would be for having a dog. And I asked him, what's the matter? And he said, you know, I posted this online and I didn't get very many likes. And I thought, so likes are more important than actually having the dog. There's something wrong there. Sometimes in my office, I'll ask kids if they have friends, and they'll say, yes, but I've learned to pursue that a little bit because some of them have gaming friends. Now, I'm not anti-technology, anti-game, and having friends, I remember our son, he was gaming online and said, I got a friend in London. We played together. I thought, hey, that's great. That's a nice experience. But if that's your only friends, that's a problem. You know, I like face-to-face friends. Those give you more of the social support that you're going to need. But they'll say that they have friends. You really got to follow up on that. And now they're getting into AI girlfriends. Maybe there are a few boyfriends, but guys tend to do this stuff more. And literally, you could have a computer, telling you exactly what you want to hear, telling you how great you are. And it's creepy, but it's expanding. And it's going to get worse as technology progresses. Lack of sleep. Parent tells me their kid's having trouble getting up in the morning. My first question is, what is this kid doing all night? Usually they're on their phone, they're on their tablet, they're on video games. And parents almost seem surprised. It's like, well, you leave where does he charge his phone at? Well, it's in his room. Okay. It's an addictive behavior, and you're leaving it in their room overnight, and you're surprised when they use it. Decreased productivity. These are phone zombies. Decreased productivity. What I mean by that, and again, I'm not against technology, but it has its place. What I ask kids, when we do an intake, I ask about hobbies. What are you interested in? Almost every kid says video games. Okay, nothing wrong with that. And I know it gives them self-esteem. Okay, I'm good at this. I share this with my friends. But I always ask, what else do you do? Do you do anything in real life? Because the problem is playing video games is not going to transfer real well to real world skills. I had a boy that when he was 12 years old was tearing apart lawnmowers, and his grandfather was teaching him how to, now I work with him. He's a senior at eHobie and in diesel mechanics program, and he's got a job at a company repairing diesel engines. That's a hobby that has some skills to transfer, or learning construction, or anything positive, musical instrument, something. But when I'm working with a kid and their almost only hobby is video games, that's a problem. Now they'll tell you it's useful. A lot of kids, I always ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? What kind of job would you like to do? YouTuber. I hear that a lot. Isolation. I sometimes tell kids, you're not going to make any real life friends sitting in your bedroom. Join something, join a group, find something you like to do and find other people who are doing it. That's how you make friends. But they can do it in their room, playing video games and talking to people online. All the research shows increased screen time, decreased happiness. And that's not just for kids, that's for people. I haven't seen any research that counters that. The more you spend on any types of screens, the less happy you are. Now, there's a tendency to normalize it too, because yes, it's natural for teenagers to start spending more time alone. That's part of being a teenager. But when they're always in their room and now they have this stuff that they can do all day there, that's a problem. All this produces stress. Kids are stressed because they're being exposed to things that they are not developmentally able to handle. Adult issues, adult problems, and literally their brains are not ready to deal with that. That's where the stress comes from. They're feeling overwhelmed because they are overwhelmed. The result of all that is a lot of anxiety and depression. As Beth said. Not that this is the only cause, but it is a cause. Other than ADHD, anxiety and depression are the most common diagnoses I get, particularly since COVID. Anxiety is probably more than depression at this point. Again, social media and technology is not the total cause, but it's part of it. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Sergeant Jerod Farris, who is going to tell us about raising response.
Okay, it's a mouthful to say that title, so I just like to work for the Norwalk Police Department since 2004. I went full time in 2007, so about 20 years I've been with that department. And right now I'm assigned to the Detective Bureau and in charge of that part of the. So a lot of what we deal with, obviously we're a small city. We deal with a lot of different crimes. There's only a few of us in the Detective Bureau, so we have a whole umbrella of things that we have to investigate, but a lot of them end up being sex crimes and internet-based crimes and stuff like that. So they've asked me to come talk about parenting and raising responsible digital citizens based on being responsible with your children and what they're seeing on the internet. So these are the things we're going to go over. So digital natives, nobody uses that term, but digital natives are people who have grown up under the ubiquitous influence of the internet and other modern information technologies. Digital natives think, learn, and understand the world around them differently from people who have not been as subjected to modern technology. So if you're born after 1990, you're usually highly connected. Most of these people that's what they were born into. It's just the digital age. Okay, I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up with landline telephones, and I barely knew what a computer was growing up until I got into college. And even then, the internet was pretty much non-existent. I mean, it was at the school, but Nikki, you went to Bowling Green with me.
Yeah.
I used to wonder why people next to each other were instant messaging back and forth in the same computer lab, and I'm like, what are you doing? You talk to each other. But so anyways, 97% of them play video games. I play video games. I grew up with Atari and all that stuff, so I enjoy playing video games. At the same time, I could pretty much, if the world went down right now, all the internet went down, I'd probably just live just as happily as I am now. So 75% of these people have cell phones. 68% use instant messaging. And these percentages might be even higher now. Some of the stuff is a little outdated. 70% use social networking sites, and they easily adapt and adopt to the ever-changing environment of the internet. And then they also generate content, like you were talking about with the influencers and the content creators on YouTube. So, yes, we are in a brave new world. The internet is always changing. It's changing very quickly. It's changing so fast that a lot of times you can't even keep up with it. So personal relationships are heavily influenced by the bubble that the internet represents. A lot of the kids nowadays, as Dr. Murray was saying, is they have relationships in other states, people they've never met before. Those are long-lasting and intimate relationships that they have with these people that somebody like my age would find that very strange, and to me, a relationship like that with somebody would be face to face. But for these people, the internet is where they develop those relationships. They accept the web as the dominant medium for social interaction with peers. I know kids that don't have any real life friends, and they're all based on the internet. And some of them are very socially awkward and very underdeveloped as people. And then they're more comfortable with the public persona. They'd rather have this internet persona of who they want the world to see them as instead of who they really are. So in a time machine, Americans spend an average of 7 hours and 3 minutes looking at a screen each day. Some of you, that's more if your job requires you to look at a screen all day, like me. Children ages 8 to 12 in the United States spend an average of 4 to 6 hours a day watching or using screens, and teens spend up to 9 hours. In 2021, some 97% of 3 to 18-year-olds had some internet access, according to the American Community Survey. Specifically, 93% had access through a computer, and 4% relied on a smartphone for home internet access. The remaining 3% had no internet access at home. And that's probably increased now 3 years later, and especially when the government is putting in a lot of groundwork to make sure that every home has internet access now, high-speed internet, even if you can't afford it. And then social networking and games dominate the time spent online. So usually that's what kids are doing now. They're either on some type of social networking page or they're playing video games. And usually it's online games. So like Dr. Murray was talking about, you don't know who this person is going to be. This is a guy representing himself as a 15-year-old girl on Facebook. Their personas are easy to fake. Predators adapting to social networks, and then the practice of sextortion, which is where they will get somebody to send them pictures of their nude bodies, and then they'll say, "Hey, if you don't give me more, or do this for me, or do some weird, disgusting video of them, they'll go tell people about it, or they'll spread it around the internet, or send it to their friends or their parents or stuff like that. We have this a lot. We have this happen a lot. There are people in our city that do this. We have families that'll come up with their kids saying, my kid's being sextorted, and you find out that it's either in the city or it's a state away or it's a whole other country. And if it's happening in another country, we're not going to go after those people. A lot of countries don't honor United States search warrants and stuff like that. And plus, the North Police Department isn't going to Nigeria to pick up this guy or wherever he's at. So it's better to just teach your kids responsibility online and not get into this type of situation. Pornography is more available and graphic than ever before. I can attest to that. I'm also the ICAC representative for our department. It's Internet Crimes Against Children. And the things that I have to look at, it just kind of sometimes blows my mind. What people will put children through, what they'll want people to do. So increasing chances of accidental exposure due to spam attacks on social networks. You download the wrong app on your phone. You go to the wrong website. It's typically porn related. Usually it's a teenager at home that's clicked on the wrong link because they're looking for porn, and then they end up downloading a virus on their computer, and then your finances and stuff are taken. Average age for first exposure to pornography is 11. That is widely, I don't believe that's changed, although I have, in my experience, I've seen kids lower than that being exposed to that pornography, whether they stumble upon it or actively look for it. So. Captain Daniels put that picture in there. That's usually where these people are, in some faraway area of the world. Okay, so we've talked about cyberbullying. So bullying through electronic means, text, Facebook, YouTube, common mediums. It can be potentially fatal. These are 3 people in the United States that had committed suicide just based on cyberbullying, where kids picked on them through social media, told them to go kill themselves, just pretty much ruined their self-esteem, and then they ultimately ended up killing themselves. We also had one here a few years ago in Huron County that I'm not going to mention the name in case somebody's part of the family that's watching that, but a kid committed suicide because of cyberbullying. So sometimes you can go after the people that are doing that, but the laws on that are pretty gray in that area for trying to hold somebody accountable for telling them to do stuff like that. So every internet and electronics are ubiquitous. Phones, computers are everywhere. I mean, just everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. There is a phone or a computer that some kid can have access to, whether it's in school, libraries, just playing with mom's phone or stuff. And how sometimes parents put stuff on their phone they shouldn't, and then their kid starts playing with it, and next thing you know, they're seeing stuff that they do in private. It's public, it's visible to everyone. The stuff that you put on the internet is not visible to everybody. It's constant. The kids are being exposed to it at school, at play, at home. It's pretty much wherever you go because everything's connected now. I went to a digital DNA class once, and to show the main reason why everything is so connected is because companies want to market their product to you, and so Google and all the big companies will sell your information to those companies and let you buy it. And even if you tried to stay completely off grid, somebody somewhere can do a digital workup on you and see that you have a lot of things going everywhere that connect you to the internet. And it's stuff that you wouldn't even think of. They put GPS sensors in tires of cars now. So as you drive by a Starbucks, that sensor says, hey, that person's by Starbucks. And then they send an ad to your phone or to your car. I mean, it's so in depth, and people don't even realize what's tracking them. That when you go to those trainings, it really opens your eyes. So it's viral, social mediums, they spread very quickly. Even if it's something that you didn't want to get onto the internet, if it's something that somebody thinks is cool or is gonna, make fun of somebody else, they'll spread like wildfires through the schools or however, and that's very damaging to children. And then there's the seriousness of it because the risk of suicide. People just can't take it anymore, and they will think that suicide is the best option for ending all the pain that they're suffering. Okay, so communication. Ask specific questions about online activities. When you talk to your children, ask specific questions about what they're doing. Ask them what they think about online bullies or bullying, because they might be one. You never know. Your child might be an online bully. But ask them what they think about that. And then tell them to tell you if they encounter kids being mean online. Because you don't know that if your child might be going through something, they might just be harboring all that inside. And then that's where the anxiety comes from, and the unresolved anger that turns into depression and all of that stuff. So talk to your children about what they're doing online. Like Dr. Murray said, don't put this stuff inside their bedrooms. Put it out in the open somewhere where they can't just hide it from anybody and look at stuff. Put it somewhere where they're going to have to go to great lengths to try to hide it from you. So having it in an open area of the home is going to help them be more accountable when they go to look at stuff online. So be vigilant. Look for changes in their online activities, their changes in their mood, shifts in their attitude towards social activities, if they're being bullied, anything like that, their personality is going to change or their attitude's going to change about stuff. And then maybe you need to take a step back and say, hey, what's going on? You know, and they might open up with you about that, and then you can do something about it. So be a parent. Be a parent to your kids. That's probably one of the major problems that we have nowadays. You were saying is that children aren't raised the same way they were 50 years ago. And, you know, everybody has their opinion on that. And I know that people have to adapt to this internet and all this stuff, but be a parent to your kids. Don't be their friend, be a parent. Okay. You're there to raise them and to make them productive members of society, not to hope that at the end of when they turn 18 that they're just your best friend. You know, you hope that they'd have a relationship like that, but ultimately you're their parent. You're responsible for raising them. I usually tell my kids when they don't like something that I've told them now, tell it to your therapist when you're 18. So anyways, decide when your kids are ready to get on the internet or to look to be socially active like that. Stress respect of others. That's a big one. If you don't raise your child to respect people and put other people first, that is going to translate to their online activity as well. They're going to be one of those anonymous Facebook posters on the Talk in Norwalk that just runs their mouth with whatever they, you know, feel like comes inside their head. And even though they didn't put any two thoughts into the sense of not knowing how it's going to affect somebody. And by the way, nobody has ever successfully won an argument on Facebook. I'm just saying. So consider maturity of the peers in the child. Some children are more mature than other children. So you're the parent, you should know your child is mature enough to start handling these kinds of pressures. Set clear rules and set clear consequences if they break those rules. And that's probably a big thing for parents nowadays is they could set rules all day long, but if they don't uphold the consequences of breaking those rules, then the kids quickly learn that I can move the boundary wherever I want to. Cyberbullying take the problem seriously. If they're being cyberbullied, take the problem very seriously. Assure your child that you will make it stop. I don't know if I'd make that type of promise to them. I mean, I would say assure your child that you would take steps to try and help them make it stop because you can't control what other people do. Don't react to the bully. That's, like I said, like successfully winning an argument on Facebook, that this is what happens. People react and then everything gets taken out of context and then you're off to the races with an argument that you never thought you'd be in. And then record and report everything. You know, take screenshots of stuff, report it to the law enforcement. So be proactive. This is just an example of downloading and signing an internet safety game plan. It's not something that, you know, your child may or may not follow that, but I think having something like that and making the child read through that and going over it with them will help them understand what you expect of your child when you get into using the internet. And then obviously if you want to hold them to those types of rules, then you can have consequences if they're broken. Get savvy, learn the stuff that your children are using. Okay, I know that's very frustrating for me. I'm like the internet tech IT guy at our place of business only because I know how to ask Google questions in a different way than everybody else does and to get my answers. But I do not like Snapchat. People go by it, it's called a Snap score, and you see that's how you can tell if somebody's huge on Snapchat. Mine's like 200 over the last 10 years that I've had it or something. It's very low. I don't care about Snapchat. I don't see the point of taking pictures of my food and showing everybody that I'm eating food. So, okay, so get interactive and get the right tools that you'll need to help your child be safe on the internet. So you must be diligent when it comes to your child's safety in this digital world we live in. You are not violating your child's rights. Okay, everybody seems to get this one they're confused about this one. You're not violating your child's rights by checking out what they are doing on their computer, phone, or any other digital evidence. You may, to them, be perceived as violating their trust, but you're not violating their rights in a legal matter. In fact, I usually, I talk to my kids, I'm like, listen, we can have a relationship built on rules, or we can have one built on trust. And I prefer a trust relationship, but if you break that trust with me, then we're gonna have to go back to rules, and rules, kids don't like rules. So, in fact, I was talking to you last night, how I woke up this morning and my kid snuck a tablet in his bed last night. And then he didn't want to go to school because he's tired. So now he's grounded from it. So, place the computer in an area accessible to everyone in the family. Do not allow your children to take their digital devices to bed with them, which is something that happened to me last night. Talk to your children about your expectations for them being online and share your concerns and fears with them. And learn how to use every device your child has access to. Too many parents are getting the wool pulled over their eyes by their children. Children are very savvy, and even you can put some parent filters and stuff on there. Kids are savvy enough that they can oftentimes find ways around that. They used to do it in the school systems. And this is just a brief internet example, but when you type in, I don't know, like the Fisher-Titus website, you type in ftmc.org, you're not actually typing in those letters, those get translated into an IP address. And that's what the internet knows the Fisher-Titus website as, an internet IP address. So it used to be, they've gotten smarter now, but in the school systems, they put filters in and they would just block like Google, block Snapchat.com, block those things, but they wouldn't block the actual IP address. So kids would just type in, they'd learn the IP address of the website, and then they just go to the browser and type in the IP address, and it circumvent the whole filter system and they get right on the internet for where they want to look at. So they did their homework at home and they come to school and, hey, look at that, go to this, and then there you go, you end up with. So these are some of the free social media websites that are popular amongst the kids now. Facebook, Instagram, everybody knows these. You guys probably have accounts. TikTok, I took TikTok off my phone. Snapchat, I do have Snapchat because I need it for my investigations. Snapchat is very popular with the kids. Most of you probably know because you can take a picture of something, send it to somebody, and then it's gone. But it's not actually gone. I do search warrants to Snapchat all the time, and I've gotten stuff back on accounts as far back as, I think the oldest I've asked for is 4 years. And that stuff's still there. And they think it disappears, it doesn't. They think they're getting away with something, it doesn't, it comes right back. And it's messages and videos and photos and all that stuff just comes right back. And these kids think it's all gone, and that's why they use it so much. Twitter, which is now X. Telegram is a common one for kiddie pornographers and people that don't want access because the servers are in Dubai and they don't respond to the US search warrants. So if you're on Telegram or you see Telegram on your kid's phone, I'd be a little suspect as to why they have Telegram on there, because they're hiding something. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook or Meta or whatever. They're encrypted. A lot of times it's end-to-end encryption, so a lot of times you can't get the messages back, kind of like some of the iPhones, where the messages don't really hit the network. They just go phone to phone. So Messenger, just a lot of different ones that are popping up. Twitch is usually a video. It's a video social networking thing where people get on their Discord. A lot of gamers use Discord, which I don't know if you ever watched YouTube, where a couple of guys will get on YouTube and they'll play a video game together, and they'll be online in the game, but they're also connected on Discord, so that if their game disconnects, they can still talk to each other. And it's more for audio sharing and music, but Discord is a big one that people, a lot of kids are on all the time too. So some I don't have on there, like Kick Messenger. Kick is a big one. I don't think that's on there. Yeah. Kick is big in the child pornography world. A lot of people use Kick to look to find child predators. Use that to communicate back and forth. So a lot of them. These are just a handful. There's a lot of social media sites on there. Grooming is when someone builds an emotional connection with a child to gain their trust for the purpose of sexual abuse or sexual exploitation or trafficking. Now, grooming isn't illegal in Ohio. I think it should be, but I think it's House Bill 322, and it's still in the committee stage right now. It was presented in 2023, I think. They're trying to make it illegal, but there's probably a lot of gray area as to trying to figure out, you can groom somebody in so many different ways. So trying to find specific behavior that actually makes it illegal. But it's hopefully pretty soon they'll make it illegal in Ohio. So signs of grooming is be very secretive, including about what they are doing online. Have older boyfriends or girlfriends. They'll go to unusual places to meet friends. They'll have new things. The groomers will buy them presents and gifts and phones and all kinds of stuff that they can't explain how they got them or why they got them or why somebody by buying them $1,000 phone. And they'll have access to drugs and alcohol. The length of time from beginning of a conversation to naked pictures is the average about 2 hours that kids will end up sending naked pictures of themselves to somebody. Groomers do this by pretending to be someone they are not. For example, saying they are the same age online, offering advice or understanding, buying gifts, giving the children attention, using their professional position or reputation, taking them on trips or outings, offering advice or understanding. Maybe they're in an argument with their parents, and this person's going to come on and go, "I understand, your parents being unreasonable and blah, blah, blah," just trying to get them to let all their guards down so that they can manipulate them. We had a case in Norwalk where, and I know, I'm not big savvy on Snapchat, but I know that if you screenshot the Snapchat, it notifies the person that sent it. Well, the way around that is people will turn on screen record. So we had a guy in Norwalk that was proposing as a 13-year-old girl, and he was, he was just reaching out to anybody that would respond to him. And once he get in a conversation with them, get them to send nudes, he'd start a screen record on his phone, and then the stuff would just come in. So he was just screen recording, so that it never told that person that they were recording. And then he moved that stuff to another phone, which in our business we call a trophy phone, because they like to keep that one off network and separate, and they'll move all their photos over that one, and they can access it whenever they want to. And then their main phone is pretty much clean, the one they'll get caught with. So online social networks, groomers can also use social media sites, instant messaging apps, including teen dating apps, or online gaming platforms to connect with a young person or child. They can spend time learning about a young person's interests from their online profiles, and then use this knowledge to help them build a relationship, which 2 hours to show a naked photo doesn't take long for a young child. So how common is grooming? It's difficult to say because often children don't tell anyone what's happening to them. Children may not speak out because they are either ashamed, which we see that a lot. They're afraid that mom and dad are going to be mad at them, or most kids know and take a picture of themselves in the state of nudity that their parents should be doing. They feel guilty. They're unaware that they are being abused, or they're in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend. So they're manipulated into believing something that's not real. Teen suicide rate is up by 32% since 2021, I think. And these are rough estimate figures, but they're right in the ballpark with what you were saying.
It's in the ballpark.
Yes. It's hard to find online numbers that were all consistent. So I kind of stayed with just the ballpark. So kids will also have apps to hide pictures and videos. I don't know if you knew about this, but there are apps out there that will hide pictures. They hide them in right here. These are some examples of calculator app on your phone, but you type in a certain code on the calculator and it opens up a whole another file where they'll put all their hidden photos in. Snapchat has a for my eyes only. feature that is pretty much locked out to anybody except them with a special code. But these are all different kinds of vaults. So then when they show up on their phone, they just look like, you know, like, oh, my kid's got a calculator app on his phone, or, you know, there's a ton of them. These are just some of them. But, and then I believe like even the iPhones now, they're doing file encryption. So it's not just phone encryption, but they'll encrypt down to the level of the file itself, and trying to get into those things. When we take them, it's very, very difficult. Kids can hide a lot of stuff on these phones. They're literally walking around with a computer in their pocket. So. And a huge computer, I mean, terabytes. I think what's the biggest one now? Probably 250 gigs, but I think they're moving up to probably 500 gigs pretty soon with phones. So the amount of data that you can hide on a phone or put on a phone is huge. So yeah, apps that hide pictures and videos. But yeah, just look out for stuff like that. You see how benign looking those icons are, and you'd never think that they were just hidden apps to hide pictures. It's empty. So
Do you
okay,
have
so
any printouts of those things?
I can get you some. I didn't bring any with me, but you want me to? At the end, I can go.
If you leave us your email, we can make sure we email this presentation to you, okay? Or something, or mail.
So this is how a typical conversation will go. Somebody will meet up with somebody online, say, send me some pics. You know, what kind of pics? I want some nudes. I'm not that kind of person. Come on, just 2 or 3 of them. They kind of wear them down. No, I don't want to go to the bathroom and take your clothes off. They become pretty much incessant with what do you want them? I like them, and they prey on their like vulnerabilities and their low self-esteem a lot of times. So you might as well, because I'm going to say you did anyway. So then, well, I might as well do it. I mean, the kids of the day just don't. They don't think clearly because they're not adults. You know, they're not mature enough. And so they just want to and don't say anything. So then they'll finally give in. So this is disseminating matter harmful to juveniles. It's felony 5. Sending pornographic images to a juvenile via the internet. Now, this isn't just adults doing this. If your child, who is a juvenile, sends pictures of themselves to another juvenile, it is against the law to do that. So just let your kids know that, yeah, if you're sharing photos with somebody else, it's child pornography, and you could be charged with it as well. We try not to do that to the victims, but it goes both ways sometimes. So telecommunications harassment, where they can constantly asking them to do stuff. There's a section in that code for things that are sexual in nature and has been told not to communicate with the recipient. That's an M1, but if they have convicted of it more than once, disseminating matter harmful to juveniles, it's not the same, asking for those images. Menacing by stalking, this is using any electronic method to cause mental distress or harm, that's a felony also. And then coercion, threatened or false malicious statement designed to injure the reputation of somebody, which is a misdemeanor, 2nd degree. So this is a summary of the charges for a caller or texter. It's a felony in 4th degree stalking, felony in 5th degree dissemination, or two of those, the misdemeanor, and those can all stack on and can result in 4.5 years of incarceration. Doesn't always happen that way, though. I think everybody, every time we go to court for these, we wish that the judge would just throw away the key on some of these people, but they'll get 4.5 years, and then if they behave in jail, they'll get out in 2, and it's like, why bother? So it's just a huge problem right now with the internet. So felony in 5th degree, this is summary charge for the recipient, felony in 5th degree dissemination, 1 year of incarceration. So this is the felony table of the things that you can see. These are max fines or max prison terms and stuff like that you might see if somebody was charged with those. So menacing by stalking is 6 to 18 months in prison with a $5,000 fine. These are max, and nobody ever gets this, but it's possible. Importuning, 1 to 5 years. That's where you are trying to get somebody under the age to come and have sex with you. Dissemination of matter harmful to juveniles. There's pandering. I kind of lived in this pandering one with doing ICAC investigations is possessing, it's possessing or sending or transmitting or downloading images involving a minor. And usually it's not just one, so it's a charge for every image. So I have a case right now where the guy has about 6,000 images. They're not going to charge him with 6,000 counts. It'd be just beating a dead horse, but they can add, most of these guys end up with like 20 to 30 counts in the court systems just to get the kind of the ball rolling. So, all right, so these are parental apps that you can download on your child's phone. I don't use any of these. I have heard like Aura and Bark are the most common ones. So what these are apps that you can install on your child's phone, and they're like keyloggers. They will record everything that your child's doing. At any point in time, you can open up your phone and see the text messages being sent. You can see what they're doing on social media. Covenant Eyes doesn't operate like that. I believe it just takes random screenshots, whatever, and then sends them to. So it's more for people that are trying to be accountable. Maybe their spouse or something, and well, I'm not going to go to this website because my phone might take a screenshot of it and send it to my spouse, and then I got to explain myself. So Aura and Bark, I've heard of MSpy. I recently recommended MSpy to somebody, and that they had an issue with the phone. And so I don't know. You have to do some research on some of them. MSpy requires you to what's called root the phone, which is jailbreak it and get into the programming of it. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that with the $1,000 phones. So for it to work properly, to see like Snapchat and stuff like that. But yes, these are lists. They have them out there. Most of them you have to pay for them. But I guess it is what it's worth. If your child's innocence and safety is worth it, then pay the fee, which they aren't too high. They're around like $15 a month or something like that. So, any questions? No. Want me to go back and look at the?
We'll have Miss Laura go, and then we'll save questions for the end. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Laura Butler. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. Part of my specialties is actually neurological disorders. So I specialize in autism, ADHD, complex post-traumatic stress disorders. The type of therapies that I do are similar. I'm certified in EMDR. I do emotional focus therapies, which is like the acupressure points. I regulate the vagus nerve, things like that. One of the areas that I thoroughly enjoy working with is seeing how kids can develop those regulation skills, those emotional skills, and really just seeing how they find connection. One of the lead-in child psychiatrists that I like to follow and that I read a lot on is Dr. Bruce Perry. And he actually has done extensive research on the detriments of technology and the internet. And one of the things that he really reviews is recognizing that we are not designed to care about the whole world. We are not designed to care about 200 people at once. We are designed to care within a max capacity of 70 people, small communities. That is how we develop. That is how our brain develops. What's interesting is that he's also done extensive research on correlations with stressors, anxiety, traumas in childhood that are highly linked to developing ADHD. There is correlations to that. So we know that ADHD is genetic, but it's also environmental. We actually know that there's more research showing that ADHD is more prevalent because of technology. Because when we develop our brains, what we forget is that when we have a plethora of images or graphic scenes that we are processing, that floods our brain with dopamine, but that also does adverse effects because when you have a flood of dopamine, you have high levels of that excitement, that, manic feeling, those feelings of, wanting to feel that way for very long periods of time. But the problem is if you're not consistent and you're not getting that hit of dopamine that technology and graphic images can give to a person constantly, that can cause a lot of dysregulation. That can cause a lot of mental health problems. That can cause depression. We know this now just because of how the brain is developed. One of the other things too that Dr. Bruce Perry has also correlated is that there is a higher amount of apathy and lower amounts of empathy because of correlations with technology. That's because children are actually missing on cues. So when we think of body language, research shows 94 to 97% of all language is body language. A lot of times with technology, kids don't develop that. They actually estimate that a child born in the 70s, by the age of 6, has over 18,000 interactions of social emotional cues and development to help them speak, help them articulate, help them regulate, help them think on the spot when it comes to certain interactions. They estimate that there's only a third of that by the time you're the age of 18. So this means that there's been a decline that we can actually see of the type of interactions that children are having, which is also going to impact their development.
Why do you think that is? Like, are they choosing to stay inside because of video games and screens?
We're actually going to talk about that because the hard part is that we are developed to be social emotional creatures. We are developed to design for connections. The problem is that the more that we see us developing connections on the internet, and not all of them are bad, I'm going to reiterate there are some benefits to technology, the less that we're seeing that they're actually interacting with different generations, which causes that lack of empathy and that lack of awareness of actually what it is to be human. So that's why we're going to see a lot of those correlations with mental health and technology, because if, let's say you have grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, your siblings live in a house, and here, instead of having a face-to-face conversation, checking in with grandma, grandpa, seeing how they're doing, which creates connection and empathy, you're looking on the internet for, things that are going to excite you. Now, that's not always the case, right? Because we know that people use Facebook where they can stay connected to their loved ones. But the reality is the less interactions we have face-to-face, the more it's going to impact our development. And your brain's not fully developed till the age of 26. So like what Dr. Ken was saying, though, is children are being exposed to things way too early because their brain's not even developed yet. And they're trying to take on these problems and these images that they can't process. That's going to create issues in your brain. That's going to create deficits. And we can see that through PET scans, MRIs, and other images. We can actually see a brain that is lit up by certain images, especially pornographic images, versus a brain that is functioning what we would, I hate to use the term, normally. We also know that there is a higher correlation of eating disorders. One of my certifications is eating disorders. I see a lot of it. The first eating disorder that was ever diagnosed was actually a male. That's why it's called anorexia nervosa, which means basically not eaten by nervousness. That was documented in 1891. We know there's a higher risk for females to have eating disorders, but we're actually shown across the board with correlations with technology that it is pretty much almost an even playing field, that we're seeing more men as well as females developing eating disorders. And that's based off exactly what, you were speaking about, is those influencers, this unrealistic expectation of what we think we should look like versus what we really look like. And that does create some detriments. But the good news is there are ways to reconnect. There are ways, even with all that I just shared with you. Dr. Bruce Perry even said that he believes that we can come back to humanity. he doesn't believe that this is going to be our end all be all, but it does have to take some work. And it does mean that we have to mirror what we want our kids to see. We do have mirror neurons. Mirror neurons is why, has anyone ever had a situation where you might have done something that you weren't proud of, and then you see your kid mimicking it 5 minutes later, and they're doing it in front of other people, and you're like, I can't believe of all things, right, that you remember or that you're going to take from me, this is what you're going to show other people. Well, there's a reason why. It's called mirror neurons, and that is connected to our emotional brain. Our emotional brain is what develops first. That is our right side of the brain. So our logical brain does not develop till after the age of 6. That's why kids are highly emotional. That's why, you're not going to talk to a 3-year-old and tell them to calm down when they're screaming and throwing a fit. You're going to try to give them a hug and self-soothe them. That's because they're not going to process that part. But with ADHD, I'm just going to give you one quick fact. ADHD disrupts your brain in ways when it comes to how your brain develops. So until after the age of 16, if you are diagnosed with ADHD, your brain is always 3 years behind your chronological age when it comes to emotions, maturity, and executive function. We actually know that. Your brain at the age of 16 will start to slowly develop, and you'll see a little bit better impulse control. But if you are a child with ADHD and you think that they should be more mature than what they are, let's say you're dealing with a 14-year-old, you better be aware that they're going to be functioning at an 11-year-old level anyways. So let alone having, the knowledge and that capability of recognizing what's going to be, good to look at on the, internet or the use of technology versus, someone who might have had a little bit more experience. So just kind of be aware that, these things do play a role in, sometimes that impulse control, or sometimes the things that we think they should know by a certain age, especially when it comes to this stuff, they may not. So one of the things that I want to touch upon is something that we call hyperconnectivity. I'm not going to go, verbatim over the slide, but what I want to do is kind of, feel like we're having some interaction and really explain what hyperconnectivity is and what types of connections that will be the most important or have the most impact for healthy development when it comes to our kids. And really, I just want to make sure that parents, loved ones, caregivers, there's things you can do. So I'll never forget, I think I was probably about 10 or 11 when I remember seeing a quote by Albert Einstein, and I can't fully remember the quote, but the quote basically said something along the lines that when technology surpasses the capabilities of human beings, that's when we're going to see people basically get stupider. I hate to say that, but we notice that people, especially with dealing with their phones or being out, it seems like they lack a lot of social skills. How many times have we gone to a restaurant and you literally see friends sitting together, they waited all day to hang out, and then they're on their phone, they're not even talking to each other, right? And what's interesting is we are not only designed for connection, but we are designed to be able to communicate. We are designed to be able to read other expressions, other emotions. But what we notice though is that social media has kind of taken an easy route for our kids, so to speak. Yes, they can learn about their emotions, right? They can learn about verbiages, about, what a therapist might say to them. But at the same time, are they really processing? Are they really connecting what that verbiage means? Or are they just watching an image and what they think that might mean? So are they really understanding their emotions? Are they really feeling them? Or are they just mimicking what they see on these social medias? One of the things that some of those in the field will argue is that for kids who might be delayed or might have certain, like what we call like the pragmatic disorders, autism, sometimes technology can be a blessing. Because if you have someone who's nonverbal autistic, they can use technology to communicate. And that's amazing. And those are things that we have to admit that yes, technology can play a pretty cool role when it comes to having an even, playing field. The detriments though is for those who are developing those skills. This is where they might be stunted because they're not getting the interactions and they're not getting the sense of well-being. And that's what we get in communities. We're designed for that. So let's go to the first benefit. So the first benefit that I hear a lot is social media allows kids to break the ice. It's a little bit less risky approach to making friends, especially for shy kids. Less risk is exactly what the problem is. So learning how to make friendships is an important part of growing up, but it's also essentially a risky thing. You're very vulnerable. Not everyone's going to like us, right? How many times can we remember as a kid that we wanted to be someone's friend, but we weren't cool enough or wearing the right clothes? Something was going on, right? That sucked. I know that feeling. And I hated that feeling of being vulnerable or feeling embarrassed. But at the same time, when you learn to kind of process and deal with those type of emotions, because the problem is that we are designed to handle negative emotions, but we're also designed for positive experiences. So let's say you had 3 bad, experiences as a child where you're rejected, but then you had one significant experience where you were connected and that person really was a valued friend, right? And that's what we're looking for is like, those are the connections that are going to build the resiliency. The problem is technology can be both good and bad because you can hide behind technology, but it's not going to help you develop the resiliency that you need to handle those type of experiences. So conversations, we know, take practice, and this is exactly what we're talking about. And those social skills are going to take practice, and the more face-to-face interactions that children have, the more that they're going to recognize, is this person upset? Is this person happy? Is this person safe? Because children can pick up a lot of things when they're around people. I don't know about you, but when I first started therapy, one of the most daunting things I had was I had an interaction where I had a little girl and it was her half sibling. And during the interaction, I remember playing a game with them, and the little girl that was my client, she looked at me and she said, "You have to be gentle with her because she has a lot of people that hurt her a lot." And what made that significant was they didn't live together, but she said I could tell because I asked her later. And this was about a 4 or 5-year-old telling me this. And to me, that was like, because I'm going to be honest, I wasn't even aware of, any of those struggles, but she picked up because she said, "Well, she's always sad." I said, "How do you know she's sad?" "Well, because it's the way that, she sits by herself," or, something like that. But a 4 or 5-year-old being able to pick up on that, like that to me was pretty amazing. And it took me years later when it dawned on me that this child picked up on something even before I did. They were more aware of what that other child was doing. So what can parents do? This is exactly what we've been talking about, is we have to model those skills and those appropriate behaviors. And what that means is it's not just, telling that child what you want them to say or do. It's about how your actions or interactions are with other people and allowing them to watch that. That's the mirror neurons. So like when you're out in the store and let's say you're having a conversation with the lady at the register, or you're in a restaurant, how are you speaking to that person that's taking your order? How are you speaking to the person at the cash register? Are you making eye contact? Are you pleasant? Are you actually asking them, how are you doing? Because often our person at the cash register asks us, "Hey, how are you?" How many people ignore that person, right? And if that's what our children are watching, right, what do you think they're going to pick up on? They're going to pick up on the same behaviors, because that's how we develop, is that we practice each other's behaviors. The other thing is show your child what it's like to make sure you're listening attentively to them. Because let's be honest, we all have chaotic lives. How many times where we can hear our child talk, but there's times where it's like, I don't even want to deal with anything right now. Let's turn off that music in the car and let's just pretend that we're not talking, right? I'm guilty of that, I'm not gonna lie. Especially when I get home, right, in our fields. The last thing we want to do is talk to someone, but sometimes it's important to recognize we have to make that effort because it allows that child to know that they're being seen and heard. And unfortunately, this is where sometimes when we talk about children don't speak up, it's not because we ever intentionally harm our children. I want to make that clear. But when we don't listen to them, they learn that they're not going to be listened to. And that's a rough thing because that's not something they can always tell you. They just know now's not a good time to talk. So we have to be aware of those things. So let's go to benefit 2. So with social media, some believe that this will lead to deeper and more intimate relationships and can even improve mental health and emotional health because kids are constantly connected to friends and family. Well, here's the truth. When kids are constantly connected and they're constantly with their phones, this is what we call hyperconnectivity. So kids are never really alone. And when it comes at, social media, but there is a benefit to learning to be alone. There is benefits to learn to be bored because that is how you teach yourself self-regulation skills because we're not designed to be constantly entertained or in action mode. We are designed to have downtimes where we are not doing those things. This is where we see that high correlation with her feelings, frustration, anxiety, depression, because I had one client, and actually it was mentioned today, and she was 18, just graduated. And she said, she goes, I think my dad has, and I never heard this term, she says FOMO. And I said, what? Your dad has what? What is FOMO? She goes, fear of missing out. Because he's constantly connected to things. She goes, I have a fear of missing out. And that dawned on me. So when we think about kids connecting, I want you to think about this. A lot of times kids will seek what they're not getting in their environment. And again, it's not intentional. If kids are seeking this excitement, right, or they're seeking validation, somewhere in their environment, they're not getting that. And that's what we got to reconnect to. Is those things that they're missing. So this shows about the average on one study is the average time that they spend on the internet and less time they spend with friends, families, and social activities. Some of the research does suggest that there's greater use of internet and it can be associated with declines in communication. And this is not just with family members in the household, but if you ever see kids where, they might have been at a point where, they wanted to explore, they were very excited about things, they wanted to share, they wanted to communicate, then suddenly you kind of notice a difference in their patterns. I would check what their internet use is. I would check, how much do they spend time in their room? Because when we develop, this is going to be the most important years, especially teenage years, to show that empathy, to show, communication, to also talk about emotions. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I had one parent that was able to express emotions and talk about emotions, but I'll tell you, my other parent, they couldn't tell you what they were feeling. They can tell you what they're thinking. No, that's not every, household, but think about how we grew up. Did you guys have a model behavior or someone who could model and share those things? Was it hard for you to express? Because that's also what's going on for your child. That's why it's important to let them know, those feelings. Don't dismiss them, explore them. We see a lot of research and it is suggesting that people are becoming more depressed and lonely and anxious because of that use of social media. So this is where it gets complicated because, again, technology is a benefit, especially if it's used appropriately, because it can help people with disabilities, it can help children with autism, it can help because there are healthy emotional games, it can help people role play interactions, especially if those areas of the brain are not, developed or they're delayed. So that's the good news is like those things are beneficial. But there's a thing that I think Ken, you touched on and you did as well, is what we call lurking or scanning. And this is when people just kind of scan other people's profiles instead of actively engaging in the content. So this is where I think we see a lot of people struggle, like, well, why can't my life be like that? You see these pictures, you're just scanning the profile, they got, like what you said was that you could pretend you'd be on a jet. I mean, if I saw that real fast, I would be like, dang, that's not my life. But sometimes, not always, when we take a deeper look at people's profiles, every once in a while, we kind of see like things aren't what they appear to be. Sometimes people are honest about how they're feeling or what's going on. And that kind of helps us get a sense that life isn't perfect and life's not designed to be perfect. Nobody's life will not be without struggles. What we also know, though, is research is showing that if you're actively engaging with friends and families, that will boost your mental, emotional, and social well-being. Because if you think about this, failure to thrive happens when our needs aren't being met. So like when a baby's not being held, loved, or touched, they can actually stop developing. That's why nurses and doctors look for failure to thrive. We also know that happens in nursing homes. People die of loneliness. Okay. So we know that we need love, connection, and we need to make sure that we are showing that out in the community as well. And that is going to make the difference. That is going to help a child recognize that they can feel a sense of belonging, they can feel loved. And I think that is one of the most profound things is when a child knows that they belong. And there's going to be many factors, not just technology, but there's ways that we can help with that. So what can parents do when we might have concerns that there might be too much internet, too much technology? Exactly what you were talking about. You're going to set up those expectations for your cell phone, for your internet and social media. Here's the thing though, consequences. If we're going to give consequences, we also have to have consequences. We can't tell our kid to get off the phone and then we're sitting here playing a game. It's not going to work. But if you grew up the way I did, how many times did our parents tell us, you do as I told, not as I do? Doesn't work that way. Usually I'm going to do exactly what I'm seeing you're doing. And then if I get yelled at, I'm probably going to respond and probably get in trouble, right? So this is where, we talk about that consistency. And one of the biggest things is when we teach them real world interactions and they see really how the world functions, that's going to help them build those skills that, is going to help them in the long run. When you see someone do something like an influencer and they're like, I got all this free stuff, or whatnot, or, I went to this makeup counter and I told them I didn't have any money and now, I have all these free samples. I hate to break it to you. That kid going to that counter or trying to do the same thing, they're going to tell them to probably get out of there, right? Because that stuff's not real. Like those are the things that we have to kind of teach people is, these things that you see that these influencers get or do, like you're not going to go to a store and no one's going to give you like thousands of dollars free stuff. You might have a free car ride afterwards, but that might be a little bit different. So we want to make sure that the more we prepare and the more we have those, that's what's going to ease their anxiety. Kids are going to be anxious because if you think about it, we all are going to be anxious when we don't know something. I'll just give you a fun little fact. As human beings, we're only born with 3 fears. Do you know what they are? Anybody want to take a guess? All right. Fear of loud noises. That's why we do the test on the babies, startle response. Fear of falling, because that goes back to our caveman days when we lived in higher altitudes. That literally became biologically ingrained. And how that happens is if you guys ever had a sleep spindle where you're about to fall asleep and then jolt back awake because you felt like you're about to fall, that is a biological ingrained response, primitive reflex. And that goes back to that. And then the other is fear of abandonment. because we will die without connection. Those are the only fears we're born with. Everything else is learned through environment. So when our kiddos are anxious or they have a fear of the unknown, that's learned somewhere. So when we don't help them develop those skills, it's going to get greater. So what can parents do? This is where you get the chance, like if your child seems upset about getting disconnected from someone, because just like what you were talking about, Ken, what your teenage boy had a girlfriend in Arizona and he was distraught. Well, this is where this might give an opportunity to help them, express their emotions. Also help them kind of wait things out. Because the problem is with technology, with text messaging, we expect instantly a response to something. Or I think you talked about the dog story, right? The child was disappointed because he wasn't getting enough likes. This is an opportunity to help them recognize, like, there are certain types of validation and there's different types of validation, but being on the internet doesn't have to be the biggest type of validation. And I think these are important things for kids to recognize, is that what we do in our life to help us feel like we're fulfilled is the things that we find emotional connection to. I think that there's also a high correlation with technology is materialism. And that's a whole different topic, but materialism, the biggest struggle, if you think about it, is that people are becoming emotionally connected to objects, not human beings. So where did we create that? The worst thing that I've heard from kids, and you guys can share too input, is that feeling of being ignored or unloved is very great. Being ignored is one of the worst detriments when it comes to emotional well-being. We actually know that being ignored can almost feel like physical symptoms of pain, stomach problems, things like that. And that's why it's very important to recognize and to help your kids in your life community to teach them, like, we hear you, right? You're not being ignored. Because once you get that feeling of rejection, that's a heavy feeling. Third benefit, social media can gives kids the time to think about a response instead of having a reply right away. So this helps them think through their words before hitting send and send in something that they might regret. But this is not always the case. How many times have people in a heated moment responded to something and they look back, they're like, I should not have posted that, right? Because it's easy access, right? You get heated. Talk about not winning a debate on Facebook and something that someone's gonna remember 5 years from now, because Facebook has this thing where it says, do you remember this? No, Facebook, I don't want to remember that. That was 5 years ago, not the same person, right? But what we want to teach is, if we want kids to learn impulse control, this is also why it's important to have that downtime away from technology, or to also teach them not to respond right away. There are times where they need to be quick on their feet, because if you're in a job interview and you get asked a question and sometimes it's not the questions you think they're going to ask you, how many times have we kind of froze up for a moment and we had to kind of think quickly? Those skills, yes, develop those, but those are, again, face-to-face interactions versus being on social media. So the other thing that we can do too is, when we do those face-to-face interactions, that's what I was talking about, is the nonverbal communication. If you think about it, if someone is deaf, right, they sign language. If someone had a stroke or has other things going on, many of us in these fields know when someone's in distress by just watching their behaviors, right? A lot of us learn what pain behaviors are, or behaviors when someone's anxious. These are skills that are going to be very important for kids to develop, especially depending on the fields that they're in. The sooner that they're able to develop these skills, I think is probably going to be a benefit, because that's also the difference of someone who may need help, who can't verbalize it. A good example is when we talk about, unfortunately, like sexual abuse, things like that. How many times have someone picked up on an airplane that there was something off going on and they could sense that someone was in distress, and come to find out that that was a person transporting someone for sex trade. And we actually see that. They picked up on those nonverbal social cues. They could feel like there was something not right. These are the skills that we want to teach our kids. So again, really what we can do is practice. When you are just with your kid, when you let your kid know that you're present, that you're there, even if it's only for 15, 20 minutes, that's sufficient enough, because I'm gonna be honest, usually 15, 20 minutes, most kids are done anyways after an interaction, like their brain's done processing. But that also gives them that connection, that bond. And then what's neat is that they're going to want to have those connections more and more. So the more we practice, the more they desire those connections. And that's the benefit. So if we have kiddos, teenagers that are struggling, we have to kind of look back and maybe try to see from the perspective, what is this technology giving them that maybe they're not getting? Can we create those services? Because I guarantee you, even as teenagers, there are times that I've been fortunate enough to see that people want to be present. They want to have fun. They want to belong, but they haven't had that. So a lot of them are going to step back from that, because that's a fearful thing, especially if you haven't had that. But over time, once they recognize that they can belong, or that they can do things right there in their community, nothing's better than to have a hands-on approach and to see youth working together, whether it's on a project, right? Because when we look at disorders like oppositional defiant disorder, the main therapeutic interventions is positive interactions, because it releases dopamine. It makes them feel good. They want more of that. So if you have a kid that is aggressive, violent, you're not going to meet them with aggression and violence. You're going to meet them with the opposite. You're going to praise them when you see them do something good, because they're going to want to keep doing it, because they know that they're finally getting the attention. Now remember, if kids aren't getting attention, negative attention is better than no attention. So if I'm being ignored, but if I throw something against the wall and now you're yelling at me, I might do it again, because that's the only time I can get your attention. So we have to kind of think about some of these behaviors that we're seeing. And then, of course, when we talked about the communication and be able to practice some of those skills. So how many times do we know a kid has his phone or her phone when they're on the bus, or they have their headphones on, right? That verbalizes that you're not interested in communicating. So if the time is, viable, maybe not let them have certain things. Now, here's the catch. There are legitimate sensory struggles that people have, and sometimes headphones and other things can help regulate them. But if that's not really the case, your kid just likes to listen to their music, try to have them go once or twice a week without certain things to see how they respond. Kind of, take it a little bit at a time. I'm not saying tell them now you can't have your phone, you can't have your music, none of that, because that's not necessarily going to work. But what will work is that you kind of almost let them test the boundaries to kind of see how they will interact with that. And this helps them build those skills where they initiate conversations. For parents, if you're on a bus with your kids, don't pull out your phone. Look at the scenery with them. If you're in a car, have them spot out different things in the environment. Make it a conversation. Those are little ways that you can interact. And so when we talk about also engaging in spontaneous conversations, I remember as a kid, I loved Jeopardy. That was a time that me and my family did have fun, because we would learn the facts, and then I would want to go read facts. And Uncle John Bathroom's reader was probably a little excessive for me, because I had several of them. And I think my family, after probably like the 1,000th fact that I read off, they're like, okay, we're done for the day. You got to do something else. But it excited me, because that was an interaction, and that's what connected us. So I wanted more of that. And that's what kids are looking for. Those types of connections, those conversations. You can do it anywhere. Like I said, you go to the grocery store. If you're in a bookstore, have them explain why they like the book. This is a great way for them to open up and kind of describe things to people. There's many, different ways that we can do that. And of course, some will say one of the benefits of social media is that we're gonna build confidence, like, in our teens by encouraging them to connect with others. Social media may actually have the exact opposite effect. We know that peer acceptance is very important in adolescence. We are actually designed for peer acceptance and peer pressure. And that goes back to when we are in our primitive days and we were in tribes. You had to be accepted by your tribe or you would die. And I know that sounds very bleak, but that was the reality. We would travel in groups. So peer pressure is very real. Being, part of your peers is very real. So if you have peers around you that are, not doing healthy behaviors or they're engaging in risky behaviors, you're going to want to be accepted. You have a higher risk of doing those things. So what we model and what we do is going to play an impact. So this is where I want to be specific on some things. So when we talk about having an impact on self-esteem or, having kids develop a healthy self-esteem, remind your child that they're loved, that they're wanted. I know it sounds insane, but how many times do we forget to say, hey, I just want you to know I love you. Or, hey, I just want you to know that, I know you've been struggling, but, in the end, you're going to feel like it's worth it, right? Because sometimes kids deal with things and they need to recognize that there can be something good, even out of the negative. Praise children for accomplishments. I'm going to be very specific. There is high correlations that the way that boys and girls are praised are very, very different. Not in everything, but when a girl says or being told that she's pretty or that she looks good or that those clothes are nice, that is a physical appearance. And what we need to do is recognize that boys and girls need to be praised on their skills and the development of skills, and the development of what helps their self-worth, right? And the development of allowing them to explore different skill sets, different opportunities. We may not think that it's detrimental, but if you tell a girl, right, from a very young age that you look pretty, always look a certain way, what do you think that's going to develop into? Is that my physical appearance, right, is going to be more important than the skills that I develop. And we actually know there's correlations to that. So be mindful of the type of praises that you get. Be open and available. And this is hard because there's times when we're not going to be. But when you can't be open and available, it is very, very important to explain to your child, like, hey, if you give me an hour, I will be able to sit down and have this discussion with you. Remind them that you want to have that discussion, but you have to maybe do certain tasks first. And then make sure that you follow through on those things. And then exactly what we've been talking about is discuss their online interactions. How are they making them feel? Invite to open conversation. Now, this is where it's going to get hard because maybe they tell you things that you don't want to hear. Maybe they admit that they did bully someone online. How do you respond to that? Because if you respond in anger and you shame them, that child's going to learn to be secretive. That child's going to learn not to talk to you. And this is hard because don't get me wrong, I don't know anyone who might not have that primal instinct where you want to kind of lash out and be like, what are you doing? But the problem is we have to be mindful that this is a learning opportunity. And explore with them why they did it.
It's, in the interest of time, we probably ought to wrap up.
Yes, so I think that Dr. Canfield has a good point with that. I think, no, this is a very good place to stop. The last thing that I'll share is that we all have what we call created narratives and core beliefs. And what that means is how we think the world functions. If children are learning those things on the internet and we're not correcting them or we're not exploring them, that can give them an altered sense of what really is and what beliefs that they hold to be true. So that's the last thing I'm going to say. Thank you.
Laura, I have a question.
Yes, some questions, please. Please go.
So we work with a lot of families and teenagers and just trying to figure out how to get the two to connect, you know, and so we do see a lot of situations where the parents just don't want to have anything to do with connecting with their child, not even 15 minutes a day. So, we did the Strengthening Families program, but, first of all, I would love to get a copy of these slides as well.
Absolutely.
I know that was asked earlier, but then also just, is it possible to try and when you don't have that support system at home, just trying to get ideas on how, and we don't have to talk about this right now, but just in general, keep it in the back of your mind. What are good ways for us when we don't have that support from the family, and we've tried everything that we can try as an agency, try and bring them that sense of connection that we recognize that they need.
Yes. That's resiliency factors, and we'll send you something, and what that is if they're not getting those connections at home, this is where there's a great opportunity for youth mentorship. There's a great opportunity for coaches, teachers, and other parental figures or adult figures to give those healthy interactions, and that can actually build resiliency. So we know kids, even if they don't get it at home, if we can get it out in the community in other ways where we have consistency, it can create that resiliency and they can get those connections.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a great question.
Other questions for our panel? Please feel free to leave your email information in the back, and we'll make sure you get a copy of the whole presentation. And don't forget, it will be on Fisher-Titus